I really don't think a lot of people realize that one of the main reasons why a lot of people don't make change or move forward or feel stuck, why people complain about the same things over and over and over again but never do anything about them, is because they don't want to. Yeah, it's one of the hardest things to comprehend, and it's one of the hardest things to admit to within yourself, is that even though you're suffering, even though you're in pain, even though you're annoyed, even though you're in situations you don't like, or even relationships that you don't like, you don't change those things because at the end of the day, you don't want to. You don't want to do the things that it's going to take to get yourself out of whatever situation that you are currently in. I'm going to tell you a quick story that it falls into like the babyest scale of what I'm talking about. So I think it was like a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago, I was working with somebody, and, she came up to me and she was like, oh, my eye is twitching so bad. And I said to her, I was like, do you think you're kind of dehydrated? And she's like, oh, you know what? Probably. I haven't really drank much water today. And I was like, well, chug some water with some lemon or even a dash of salt or something, because a lot of times a twitchy eye is, some dehydration. And she was like, oh, okay. And then she just walked away. Cut to like 30, 40 minutes later, whatever, she comes back up and she's like, oh, my eye is like still twitching, whatever. And I asked her, did you chug some water and, put some salt in some water or anything? And she's like, oh, no. And I'm like, okay. And this is in one of those moments when I'm not going to tell somebody like what to do with themselves. Like I'm, giving, I guess, essentially unsolicited advice, but she's coming to me complaining about something. And I'm the type of person that's going to try to help in whatever way that I can. But when the person is kind of like, shrugs things off that you're like telling them might help, then in those moments you're like, okay, this person doesn't want help. They just want to like complain about their twitchy eye. And like I said, this is on the like tiniest scale of what I'm talking about, but it's across the board. It can be on a tiny scale or a really large scale. If you are somebody that is just going to want to vent about your stuff, which is totally okay, by the way. Like I get a lot of people who, and I've gotten used to asking when people come to me to talk, I'm like, when they're like venting and going off, I'm like, do you need some help? Do you want advice? Or you just like need to get off your chest? So you want to kind of clarify with people like what they want to get out of the conversation, because I've learned to like not try to tell people what to do with their lives unless asked. And also some people just need to get things off their chest, and that's totally okay. It's also funny too. Another example is I have a friend who, I talk to pretty regularly, and she's always saying how she kind of just always throws in this comment of like, oh, if I could just lose 10 pounds. One day when I lose 10 pounds, and she'll say to me like, oh, can you just help me lose 10 pounds? And I've told her, yeah, let's do it. Just let me know when you're ready. And it's funny because I had to say to her at one point, like, do me a favor and can we just admit that you don't want to lose 10 pounds? Number one, you don't really need to. You're like within your healthy body weight. You're a very healthy person. You're very active. Like there's really no like need. It's not like a need. You just keep saying it because it's this like conditioned thing where it's like this loop stuck in her head sometimes where I'm like, you don't really need to lose 10 pounds. And at the end of the day, can you just admit that you don't want to? You travel a lot. You know what I mean? You like what you like. You're healthy. You work out a shit ton. Like you're fine. Like, but I feel like if you just dropped that narrative, you'd probably lose 5 pounds because you're probably holding on to something energetically that's like, let's just not have that conversation anymore. Like, you're fine. And so it's just funny because she was like, yeah, you're right. I probably should just stop talking like that. And I was like, yeah, you don't need to lose 10 pounds. And saying it over and over again and not doing it is like keeping your body holding on to something and keeping you in a loop. So it's like, just admit that you don't want to. When I'm going to work with somebody, it's the main question that I ask them, because I know a lot of people who have come to me that they want to lose weight or they want to do this, they want to do that. And then, 2 hours in or 2 sessions in or whatever it takes, like I'm looking at them, I'm like, you don't want to do this. Like, you think you want to do this, and I can tell that you want to get out of what you're in, but you don't want to do what you need to do in order to get out of it. So I think a lot of people, when I tell them like, it sounds like you don't really want to do this, they interpret that as me saying, oh, you want to stay where you are, which is not the case. You cannot want to be where you are and also not be ready to do all the things that it takes in order to get out of where you are, to get over here. And so that's why it is so important to legitimately ask yourself, like, do I really want this? Do I want out of here so bad, or do I want to be over here so bad? Because if I do, then I'm going to really take the steps to get what I want and get out of what I don't want. And I'm telling you, this is one of the biggest reasons why people don't make change. And it's not as cut and dry. And this is the whole thing. Like, when I ask people, like, do you really want this? And it's not a surface question. It's not this like, do you want to not do this or not do that? There's nothing surface about it. It's a question you sit with yourself for a minute and you ask, like, do I really want this? Like, do I really want to get out of here to be over there? Or essentially, am I ready? Because if anybody knows the difference between somebody who sticks with something, who's disciplined enough and stays regimented and stays consistent and does all these things to get from A to B, the difference between that person and the person that starts and stops and starts and stops is this person over here wants it more. Like, they want it more. And it's a hard pill to swallow for people over here to be like, oh, so you're saying that I want to be in this relationship and I want to do this and I want to suffer and I want to do this. It's like, no, nobody wants to do those things, but there's something going on that's keeping you from wanting this over here bad enough. And it's like the twitchy eye thing. It's like, clearly, it's like nobody wants a twitchy eye, but she didn't not want it enough to want to do something that could be potentially helpful. And believe it or not, a lot of the things that we could do to get out of certain situations or suffering or whatever it may be are actually pretty simple and can take short amounts of time. But we are so conditioned to wait until crisis. Like, as a society, as humans, as Americans especially, we are so conditioned to wait until crisis ensues before we do anything that we have a hard time wrapping our brain around those small things that are preventative care, or those small things that could help now that could prevent crisis from happening, because we are just kind of like, it doesn't bother me. It's not that bad. It's no big deal. I mean, it's just a little stomach ache. It's just headache. It's fine, or whatever. And then later down the line, when something chronic happens or something stressful happens, then we act. Then we go, oh, now I need to do something. Now I need to make change. Now I want it enough. And that is a very serious question. And it's not to be defensive over. It's not to take offense from. It's a legitimate question. And I ask that to people. Like, my applications when you work for me as a coach, like, I want to know if you really want to do this, because otherwise you're just going to be going back and forth and spinning in circles and wasting your time, your time and money. And I don't want to do that as a coach, because I want to work with people that really want to work on themselves and want to create change for the better. So yes, there are a lot of people out there who really are in their own way. And yes, they're in certain situations where they don't have control, but a lot of the time, and most of the time, there is some control that they can take in order to get themselves out of situations, that are creating suffering for them. And it's interesting because if people see this, there's going to be a lot of people in my comments and in my personal messages probably coming to the defense of themselves. Well, you don't really know what I've been through, and you don't know this, you don't know that, and sometimes it is hard to do this, and and it's like, this is the box that you're creating for yourself, and that is the reason why you're stuck. This is the reason, because to me, there's always a way. It might be challenging. It might be not what you thought of. It might not be who you thought you were going to see and do things with or whatever, but there is a way. But the thing is when you are in your own way and there's something keeping you back from really wanting it enough, then yeah, all of those things are going to box you in. Those hurdles are going to exist. Those obstacles are going to be there, because there's a little part of you that isn't wanting it enough. And it's a hard conversation to have. It's a hard pill to swallow when you recognize that you're like, oh, maybe I am comfortable where I am. Maybe I am getting something out of this situation that I'm in, and maybe I'm just afraid to take the first step. So next time you find yourself complaining about the same things over and over again, or if you're a person that hears people, being redundant about things they're suffering from, ask yourself or ask that person, like, do you just want to talk about it, or do you want to make change? Because at the end of the day, it's so possible. It is so possible. I mean, people come from the depths of the darkness and create beautiful change in their life. Addicts come to mind. I've dealt with so many people suffering from addiction in my lifetime, and if you really want it, like, it's it's real. And not saying that people who are in it want it. Again, just because you're in this doesn't mean you want it. But there's a way to flip the switch to where you want out of it so bad that change is possible. And there's beauty on the other side. And we just have to sometimes sit with ourselves and ask ourselves, like, are we getting in our own way? Am I comfortable in my suffering? What am I getting out of it? Like, do I really want out of this? Because at the end of the day, you can be. And I just want to remind people of that. I know this is going to sound weird, and I'm probably getting a lot of people, jump into defense, and I understand you. I see you. But I'm telling you, change can happen, and beauty is on the other side if you just want it bad enough.